I think is part of the conversation we're going to have here tonight. So welcome Supervisor Mitchell and welcome Dr. Rowe. We're so happy that you're here. We're so happy that all of you are here in this room, creating this space to talk about something very intimate. But also, I think this is an opportunity to open the conversation and open the community. So I view this moment as an invitation to, I invite you into this conversation. So with that, we're going to make sure that there's some time that you can ask anyone on panel, particularly the supervisor, because she's our special guest, any questions you might have about her hair or about her policies. Well, about a specific policy. Let me stand corrected. You have to go to Tuesday if you want to ask about other policies. Okay, so let's talk a bit about the Crown Act, Supervisor Mitchell. And can you share with this esteemed audience the moment you realized that this legislation was necessary?
Okay, so the moment. So I was, you all remember the young New Jersey wrestler?
Yes.
Remember that image of that woman attacking, not just cutting his hair, but if you watch the video, it was an attack. And I'm a parent, and I thought we have to sign permission slips to, like, you know, go from the one side of the playground to the other.
Right.
So how could someone be be physically attacking him that way? And I remember watching it over and over, and every time I'd see it, I'd have another aha moment. Like, where were his parents? How did he, you know, why was he put in a position to have to make that decision alone?
Right.
To decide to lock is a process.
Right.
I've talked about being a parent. My son was locked for a period of time. He had a false start. You know, went to school with the two-strand twist. Came home that evening and said, we need to have a conversation. Okay. I've been locked not his whole life, but his memory of me. And, you know, while there were young men who were locked when he was in elementary school, I was clear that that was an individual decision. It's a decision you have to make yourself. And he had a false start and, you know, talked about the attention it drew and the questions. And I said, yeah, that's a part of the process. So if you aren't ready to handle that, then you aren't ready for your two-strand twist. But I think the moment I knew, so anyway, I'm at a conference, History of the Crown Act, how it came to be. I'm at the conference of the National Black Caucus of State Legislators. My own affinity group, Nobel Women, the National Organization of Black Elected Legislative Women, Black female state legislators across the country, had a breakfast the last day of the conference. And the senior VP from Dove, A.C. Eagleson-Bracey, was doing a presentation, a speech, and talked about the survey they had conducted of Black women about our own attitudes about our own hair. And some of you may be old enough to remember that historic, the baby doll test, where the Black kids gravitated to the white dolls. Well, having conversations, family meeting, ourselves about our own hair could be very telling. And so the survey results were just made me sad about our own attitudes about our hair. And so what AC was asking was for a legislator to consider introducing a resolution to talk about this issue. When I looked at the survey results, that conference is in November. In December, typically in the state legislature, you are kind of putting the final touches on your legislation that you'll introduce in January. So I go back and tell my staff, call this lady, these survey results were horrible. I thought, why not a woman who's locked, who ran for office locked? So that's the only context in which my legislative colleagues knew me. Makes sense. And I said, I'm not introducing a resolution. I, as an elected official, I can legislate and appropriate. So we're going to write a law, not just a be it resolved. I'm like, I'm not doing that. That's how it came to be. The moment I knew I was the right person at the right time, at the right place, was our first policy committee meeting in Judiciary Committee. And this bad sister attorney who had spent years doing legal research and litigating on behalf of natural hair was our witness. And a colleague of mine asked her to explain race-based traits. Because what we did, what the Crown Act does is it declares our hair a race-based trait and therefore can be protected under the law. Under EEOC law, you're protected you're protected against discrimination based on gender, age, sexual orientation, all those things. And we put race-based traits in that same body of law. And that's what the Crown Act does. That's why we have the protection. So he wanted to understand what other race-based traits were. And without hesitation, she read him like only a skilled, confident, frankly, Black woman can. I mean, it's our gift. And he caught me in the members' lounge later and said, Holly, I just don't understand. Da, da, da. And I said, well, he was relatively new to the Senate. In the state legislature, there are maybe 4,000 to 5,000 bills introduced a year. You can't be an expert on all of them. And if anybody tells you they are, they're not. And so I said, well, you're new to the Senate. What I have learned since I've been here, there are people that I know who do go deep in those policy issues. And there are people who watch me on all things women's health, children's health, child welfare services, criminal justice reform. I had my own body of policy areas of expertise. So you kind of looked at those people. I said, so since I am the only Black woman serving in the California State Senate, and I happen to have natural hair, how about on this one, you just trust me? Because for you to ask me questions about a Covatus, and you're maybe 35, I'm not sure the source of your information, and anybody in here under 40 didn't even know what a Covatus is. I said, the fact that you have time traveled to ask me about a Covatus suggests I'm not sure that you are really coming to this and to me with an authentic, real inquiry. So I'm going to take that for what it might be and just say, why don't you trust me? So we say it passed unanimously. Actually, it didn't, because he abstained from all the votes. He abstained in Judiciary. He abstained on the Senate floor. The beauty of that story is the day we were going through the bill signing. This is 2019. It was the first bill signing ceremony Governor Newsom did in his office. He'd been elected that year. And so there's a member's elevator. That's AC from Dove. Standing in the chair behind the governor, it was my loctician of 20 years, Gwen Staples, who has since passed. Yeah, Gwen. I flew her up so she could see it. So all those women you saw in that picture, I take them in the members elevator to go from my office on it's only been 5 years. What floor was I on? The 5th floor to the governor's office, the whole group. And the elevator stops on the 3rd floor, which is where the Senate floor is in the members' lounge. And the elevator door opened and he was standing there. Oh. Holly. Hi, Senator. Well, where are you headed? To a bill signing. The bill you didn't support. As the elevator door closed. The bill you didn't support. And so they all knew of the story. And we looked at each other and fell out laughing. And I'm sure he heard an elevator full of women laughing from the 3rd floor all the way to the 1st floor. So that moment, of all the people, of all the times a day for the elevator to open, it's him alone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That was a divine intervention. I'm gonna say another. Yeah. So, there's so many, that story is so rich. I have so many questions, but I want to make sure I get Dr.
Please.
Rowe in here on
Please.
this one, who is our resident expert in race studies, identity, and representation. How do you interpret the cultural significance of natural hair in today's climate? Now, I want to contextualize this because we are in California, Southern California, very progressive area. I grew up in other parts of the country where it was not progressive. And I now understand that Dr. Rowe and I have similar passings or intersections in the Middle West, where when I locked my hair, there was nobody. There wasn't a loctician. There was that title it didn't even come into fruition yet. So let's talk about it from this vantage point and I'd love to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, of course. And thank you all so much again for having us here. I'm so honored to be here. There's so much I could say, right? This is such a huge question. But suffice to say, as we read a little bit of the history towards the beginning of the event, we know sort of for most of the 20th century and prior in the US, in the West, natural hair was quite rare. Straight hair was very much the norm, not only the norm, but sort of what was seen as beautiful, what was seen as professional. Of course, we had kind of varying moments, like maybe you're an artist, maybe you're an activist. There was folks who did have natural hair, but in terms of what was the norm, what was the standard, what was professional, of course, for most of the 20th century, that's going to be straight hair, wigs, and relaxed hair. And so I think, we're having this conversation about natural hair, race, is natural hair discrimination, race discrimination. I think as we see sort of progression throughout the 20th century, different kind of activist moments and moments of resistance. Of course, famously, the Black Power movement, mid to late 1960s. We also kind of early 20th century saw some pockets of it with like Garveyites and kind of those moments as well. But as we see kind of moments of resistance and racial progression, we see it kind of opening up of what kind of hairstyles are acceptable. So now that we're in the 21st century, natural hair movement, Obama is president, we see kind of these really big strides in terms of acceptability of natural hair. But of course, as this bill speaks to, we still have these moments of tension and these moments of policing. And so there's been so much progress, but there's definitely work to be done. And this bill and conversations like these feel like a big part of that, I think.
That's right. And so just again, to socialize this a little bit more, when I was younger, there were only two people who had locks. Bob Marley.
Right.
Right. And Tracy Chapman.
Yeah.
And the vitriol that you would hear about Tracy Chapman and her hair and the comments about her from my own family, from my own beloved grandmother who has now since passed away.
Yeah.
When I locked my hair, she's like, but you're going to be ugly. Right. That was her frame of reference. Right. Or it's going to stink. You're not going to wash it. Like all of these sort of.
And what will other people say?
What will they say? How are you going to get a job? Like this kind of mind frame. And so it leads me to the question, and I'm going to ask this of both of you to kind of share with the audience. Do you think hair discrimination is the same as racial discrimination? Are they the same? Is there a cross section, an intersection, or are they different?
Yeah, I think it's a fascinating question. I don't think that they are exactly the same as in they mean the same thing, but I think they're deeply interconnected. What was the exact language you were talking about in the bill? A race
race-based trait.
Yeah, I wrote it down.
It is a,
Yes, a
because it is
race-based
a
trait.
Mhm.
That feels right because, of course, having natural hair does not equate to Blackness, but it's so sort of deeply connected to Blackness. And I think part of what sort of the bill does and kind of these conversations help illuminate when we get into things like legislation or dress codes is something I've sort of written about and talked about before, right? We can look at kind of corporate dress codes or school dress codes, and they will list inappropriate hairstyles and they will list locks, afros, braids alongside blue hair, mohawks, right? So there's this kind of othering and exoticizing that happens that is so deeply racialized, right? The way that Black people's hair sort of naturally grows out of their head is equally as controversial, kind of purposefully agitating as like a mohawk or a pink hair. And so I think, yeah, of course it's all about sort of history and race politics and, white supremacy, racism. We should be unafraid to sort of say these words and these conversations. Yeah.
Yes.
No. Supervisor Mitchell.
I agree. The day before he signed the bill, the governor and I were doing press, and we were in a room off the side of the Senate floor, waiting to be interviewed at Good Morning America. And his social media blew up, and just people were like, how classic California. California has unhoused people and this and that, and he's talking about hairstyle. And he was eloquent. And at the bill signing ceremony, for me, it was a moment when I knew he saw me. When he said, in response to the social media drama, this isn't about a hairstyle. This is about discrimination.
Yeah.
It is a form of discrimination. Because when you think about it, we were the only group of people who were told how to wear our hair. I got hundreds of letters from parents and the copies of the suspension notice based on the dress code violation, where the violation was your hair is a distraction to others. My hair is a distraction to you, so I'm being suspended because you distracted by my hair. And I thought, and the Dove support was phenomenal because that's what helped, blow us up. There are all kinds of good policies that passed, but if you don't have a marketing team and a PR team to get you in Essence and get you in O Magazine, so that was another interesting experience for me. And so to be on panels and travel and to meet and to be on a panel with the young girl who was suspended, who was told at 13 her hair was a distraction to others. Now, it is hard enough on a good day to be a girl at 13. And to be told that something about your natural state is inappropriate. To be told that your mother, who chose to put your hair in plaits or braid your hair 2-strand twists, that the school policy can trump your mother's decision about what to do to your hair. That is a layered kind of message that we are all going to have to work overtime to unpack for those young people. So it's discrimination.
That's right.
Plain and simple.
Plain and simple. I'm listening to the two of you thinking, like, would they have said that to someone who is of Asian descent, whose hair is naturally straight, typically naturally straight, what would happen? It wouldn't be tolerated. It wouldn't be tolerated. Or someone who has loose curl pattern, as an example. You can't have curly hair.
However, I have been contacted. There were some women in the media who covered this, who talked about, and you remember the Barbra Streisand movie where she's ironing her hair? You remember that?
No.
And so I think that, what was it? Like Stars Born? Say it again. Was it A Star Is Born?
Stars, the original.
The original.
Chris Christopherson.
Yes.
Okay.
No, it's not A Star Is Born because it's with Robert Redford. It's with Robert Redford. The Way We Work. Thank you.
Thank you.
And she has curly hair, and she's getting ready for a date, and she literally has her hair on the ironing board, and she's ironing her hair.
Yeah.
And right. And
Yeah.
so I have met white women, Jewish women
Yes.
who had heavy curly hair who said they were told, those who work in the press, like, oh, once you graduate school and you're going to try to get a job in the media, you might want to do something about that.
Well, and I think that there's a like somewhat of a demarcation, because I qualified that hair as a tighter curl pattern. So when it's loose curl pattern, you know, the California
Rita Hayworth
lazy
curl.
look, yeah,
Right.
that's
That's
okay.
Well, you know, a part of the Dove survey, which, you know, broke my heart, that when you Googled beauty,
I've seen that study.
you've seen that.
Yeah.
It's blonde hair. When you Googled pretty hair. And then we all remember being offended by Bo Derek being credited with inventing
The
French braids.
yes,
not
cornrows, or I don't
right.
know. I don't even know if they called them cornrows at the time.
No, well,
okay.
yeah, now,
Yes.
right.
I mean, so this is such a rich conversation around hair. Let's talk a little bit about since the passage, and I don't want to minimize like this part of the conversation because I think this is really important. But since the passage of the Crown Act, have you seen the conversation around natural hair evolve? And I want to talk a little bit about government, and I want to say, I came to Los Angeles County a decade ago. And this is a county at the time of 110,000 employees and at least 100 to 150 leaders in the county. There wasn't one. There wasn't one other woman who had natural locks when I came. And that was really concerning for me because I spent so much time on the East Coast where you see, at that time, again, a decade ago, you see locks everywhere, and then to come here, and then fortunately for me, Supervisor Mitchell came, and then other women came, and now there's quite a few of us. But let's talk about that. Do you think it's more accepted now? Sorry. I thought she was giving you the mic.
Yes, I was just gonna say, what do you think? You think it's more accepted now? How long have you been locked?
I locked my hair in 2019, so
right before the pandemic.
6 years. Yeah.
How long have you been locked?
I've been locked for 36 years. I know it's hard to believe I'm only 38, but this is my 36th year.
Okay.
Yeah. You know, I would say even since I did it, I feel like there's more acceptance. Like 2019 doesn't seem like that long ago, but I feel like
it is for a lot
more and more common. I think that, you know, I do a lot of writing on the contemporary natural hair movement, sort of mid 2000s onwards. We get this kind of mostly internet based, like a critical mass of women stop chemically relaxing their hair and kind of learn from the internet in many ways to style and maintain their natural hair. And so I think for a lot of women like me who did that around 2009, 2010, I think like locks feels like a kind of progression, that not that every single person who wore loose natural will lock, but I think it feels like a natural kind of progression. Like, I know I'm not going to relax my hair again, but I want to try something new. And if you're me, you just get lazy is part of what it becomes. And locks is a lot kind of more low maintenance, but
in some ways.
I was about to say.
I don't go for the retwist too often. I'm going to
be the retwist, the washing, the color. I mean, there's a lot to it.
Yeah.
You know, I want to kind of speak to what you're saying about, you know, at some point it's kind of like the progression has happened, but let's enter Supervisor Holly J. Mitchell in one of the most powerful positions that one could legislate from. That's a moment for applause. So she came into her office here at the time of, and I have to do some pop culture here, Olivia Pope. So I call it the Olivia Pope effect, and we're not talking about that part of Olivia Pope.
I love all things Olivia Pope.
We're talking about her hair and the look and the presentation, the small, beautiful, feminine, straight hair, that whole dynamic of what became sort of the archetype for women in politics, Black women in politics. Then we enter Supervisor Holly J. Mitchell, who is completely different than that and just as bold and just as strong as the character. So I preface my question with that. Has it changed? And what have you seen, and how do you feel like your presence has created that change? I went off script, y'all. I'm sorry.
I'm flattered. I locked for my 40th birthday, and I'll be 61 in September. So 21 years. And I've been going to Gwen. I have done everything one can do to their hair. Braids in the 70s, 80s, Sabongale, Mecca Frazier braids, cut it off. My lobbyist picture in Sacramento was, low, but I've done everything, asymmetrical.
I have the pictures.
I have done it all. And was going to Gwen, 2-strand twist. I like big hair. And so 2-strand twist, you take it out, you have big hair, curl. And I said, I'm not gonna lock. And I was going to Gwen maybe 5 or 6 years, over time, watching the locks come out of her chair. And the trans just made the decision and decided, as my mother would say, oh, you think you were GAW at 40. And I thought I was, little did I know. And I was a
GAW for those who are not
grown something woman.
I still didn't catch the other word.
Yes. So you have to, Covatus?
Yeah.
I'll take that later.
Yes. I had to look it up.
Nat King Cole. It's a process.
Oh.
Conk. I said Covatus. He didn't say Covatus. He said conk is what he said. I said it wrong.
Pompadour.
I said it wrong. It makes it worse.
We know about the
Forgive me. I was on the freeway in my brain. He said conk.
Okay, we know about the.
And this guy was like 30-something. I'm like, how do you even know that word? Conk, like think Nat King Cole.
Yeah, we know that one. Yeah.
Process. And I was also CEO of Crystal Stairs.
Mm-hmm.
And so I knew it would be perceived as a political statement. That's when people look at you. I knew that.
Yep.
And I knew, because I thought I was a GAW at 40, but I had positional power. And I knew at the time that Crystal Stairs is about 400 plus employees. I knew that I would also be sending a signal to them that if the CEO could do this, it really is acceptable. So that was kind of my thought process. I decided to run for office in 2010. And my shoe closet, as in kitchen cabinet, my shoe closet of advisors, we did a national scan and didn't find another Black elected woman with locks. There was a sister from Baltimore in Congress who wore braids. And then, of course, the sister just passed from Texas, braids.
Houston. I can't think of her name right now.
Don't come to me in a minute. Sheila Jackson Lee.
Thank you. Yes.
But no one we could find. So we called Emily's list. Anybody with locks? Nope. Okay. So I decided that people would make the decision to vote for me based on what was inside my head, not how I chose to wear my hair. I then proactively had a conversation with my campaign consultants. Because, campaign consultants want to win. And they will tell you, you ask any elected official, mainly of women, what someone has told you on the campaign trail. Don't wear those big hoop earrings. Holly, your big jewelry is a bit much. Can you wear some pantyhose? And all of that. And I made a decision, because remember I was a GAW. that while I thought I would be good in public office, I wasn't willing to change who I was.
That's right.
And so I had to proactively talk to these nationally recognized campaign winning consultants. There were a couple things that were off limits, and my hair was one of them. I didn't want them to come to me say no, and then me be looking at them sideways the rest of the campaign.
Yes.
I wanted to be proactive and help them understand that it was non-negotiable. Period.
And that's exactly what I was getting at. That's right. And so now you hold this very powerful position, and I see more women with natural hair across the country.
Yes.
And I wonder, like, how much have you informed that? How much has your presence given permission? I can tell you from my own vantage point, from my field, I was one of the first. And I know today that I'm not. And I go to conferences and I see us everywhere because now there's a choice. And so, and I want to be really clear here. I don't think anyone on the panel is saying straight hair versus natural hair.
No, it's choice.
Never. It's
right.
Exactly
it's
that. It's the choice. And something that I love so much is that women who do the I wish there was a better way of saying it, the fake locks, but then they take them out, and then they have another hairstyle, and they have the freedom to kind of posit themselves where they feel like positing themselves.
Right.
That is a unique position for Black women because there's so few opportunities to be your full self and to bring your full self. So I thank you for that, Supervisor.
Appreciate you.
So some critics say that this law wasn't necessary.
Yes, of course.
I believe that it is. And I was sorely disappointed to hear that to understand that it didn't pass nationally.
Me
Because
too.
while we do have a level of progressive thought and ideology here, we all know that there are parts of the country that it's not the same. And so let's talk about that. Do you think that it's that the Crown Act is symbolic or unnecessary? I think I know the answer to this, but I would love you to put the academic spin on it.
Yeah, I mean, my first thought is, first, of course, I don't think it's just symbolic. I think it is necessary. I think we've just scratched the surface in terms of different cases and experiences and spaces socially that require this law. But I also think that even if it were symbolic laws pass all the time. I can think of, not to cross politics, but some specific laws that we are having conversations about now, about trans people, about different populations, where this is not a real problem. You are crafting this law and putting this law to take a stand on something and to make a statement, and because you want this conversation to be taken seriously in the public sphere. So even if this was just symbolic, quote unquote, I think it's meaningful in terms of the conversation it started, in terms of us having serious conversations about these things. But certainly I don't think that it is just symbolic. I think it's very necessary. Yeah,
the opposition in the U.S. Senate several years has been, one of those, it's a solution looking for a problem. The assertion is that the existing EEOC and protections on the books would cover it.
Right.
My argument about that is, every case we looked at, you remember the airline stewardesses and the bank tellers in the 70s trying to wear braids. Every case was lost. There was not a single case where the woman prevailed.
Yeah.
Because there was no body of law for the court to opine on.
That's right.
That's why we had to create it and acknowledge that the way our hair naturally grows is race-based. And we're good with that. And so that's when I understood that the reason, because courts, make their determination based on an interpretation of the law. So there was nothing in the law to provide the protection.
Mm-hmm.
That's the point of the Crown Act. The other point is, for me, I knew we'd hit on something the first summer, that first July, when I heard from my old HR director, Crystal Sayers, that I'm in Vegas at the National HR Directors Conference, and there's a whole track on the Crown Act. At the National Bar Association that summer, a whole track on the Crown Act, because the Crown Act is the backstop. We don't want to get there where you have to assert your right. We want it to be baked into the policies on the front end. So for the national HR directors to be talking about the Crown Act and informing HR directors, for the National Superintendents Association to be talking about it, that let me know, well, these dress codes at schools will be addressed. That's been the beauty. I think that it has begun to proactively create a conversation and create a culture shift that will prevent the need for the law. Because when do you go to the law? When your rights have been violated. And I want the backstop to happen sooner.
Yeah, I like that.
And if I could just add, I think too, it's so just like meaningful as a kind of culmination of a thing, right? Like, I think there's been so much at the intersection of like race-based activism, feminist activism. This is decades of work. Even the natural hair movement kind of itself, this is stuff that organically, like, women, like, people have done lots of work to advance.
Yeah.
And so I think you know, even for people to be able to see the culmination of that work and see the years of, like, I had this story and we started this natural hair club at my school, and like, all those different things kind of coming together in something that we're having this kind of national discourse about, I think is super meaningful.
And to know that it is a movement, not a moment. All you have to do is walk through a drugstore.
Yeah.
And remember when Carol's daughter or Afro Sheen, Ultra Sheen, and Afro Sheen Cosmetics. Remember when that used to be this section of the shelf? And you walk now, it's row after row, section after section. And the beauty industry is one of the, most significant gazillion-dollar industries in this country. So for that industry to understand that there was a market, to acknowledge that we spend more on our hair care than most groups of women, just walking down that aisle tickles me. I said, yeah, because if we weren't going to embrace and own our movement, they have figured it out from a monetary perspective. There it is.
There's some really great micro brands, however, that we can continue to support Black creatives and Black chemists and people who are creating products for our hair in its natural state.
Yes.
You could talk to me after if you want some recommendations.
Yeah. Local as well.
Yes, very local.
Very local. And I wanna move to the questions because I want to make sure this becomes an interaction, which has already been, because this is the way a supervisor is. All of you are having a conversation with her. There was one woman, I believe she was part of the Friends group in the back, who brought up a really great parallel conversation, and I believe some of your scholarship is on this as well, about dress codes. And in her case, I don't want to steal her thunder, but she was talking about tattoos as an example, and like, where is the professionalism, and is there a line? Supervisor and I work in government. You're in academia, so I think you have a lot more, wider breadth than I think the two of us do, and we are anomalies. Let me reassure you. Where is the line? Is there a line? Should there be a line? I'll posit that there and then open the floor.
You want me to start?
So, I think there will always be a line. I think the point is, as culture influences our norms, the line will move. When I got to Crystal Sayers was founded by, two Black women, Karen Hill Scott, Alice Walker Duff, and I got to Crystal Sayers in 2000, they had a dress code. And, you know, sometimes it's generational. Love you, Karen and Alice, in case you're watching. They had if a woman wore open-toe shoes, she had to wear stockings. And I was like, Alice, I'm 6 feet tall. I'm not wearing stockings. And no visible piercings, I think. Yeah. There may have been a tattoo thing. And I realized it was generational. And I remember telling them both, if we leave this in our policy, there won't be anybody in LA County I can hire at Christmas Fair. There just won't be anybody. And so I think that there always will be a line in terms of cultural values and mores and norms. I think it will move. Mm-hmm. Just like us with locks in our various professions and tattoos, which I have. But I think it'll move. When I got my second piercing, my father said, "You're gonna be an old boy with a second hole in your head." You know, the long hair, the Beatles. It was revolutionary. Yeah. You know, so I think through time, what's acceptable is adjusted based on cultural and the masses. We will make the difference. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that's exactly right. Like these things are fluid. These things are socially constructed. These things are to some extent made up. There's nothing sort of natural or inherent about these kind of guidelines. And when we look at sort of notions of dress codes and professionalism, oftentimes we see them sort of emphasizing one, kind of modesty, which isn't really what we're talking about with hair so much, two, sort of hygiene, cleanliness, and three, kind of what I was talking about before, like things that are sort of meant to provoke, like distraction, attention seeking. So the mohawks, the bright colors, and so as we sort of break these things down in the context of natural hair, one, certainly most of us know by now, hygiene wise, this is not really a thing. I think like we're breaking down that stigma little by little, particularly with locks, this notion that natural hair is like unclean or unkempt or something like that. And even if we sort of accept this kind of unkempt framing, right? Like when we look at this scrutiny only happens, of course, with Black people, right? I remember in middle school, in high school, the white girls would do, it would be called like the messy bun. And that was the whole idea, was like you would just throw the bun up like and kind of like, and it's like, it was a look, it was a whole thing. The idea was that it was like, they would call it, oh, I'm just wearing my messy bun. So this idea of like, every hair needs to be in its place and sort of the hyperfixation on that is so race-based and so sort of, that level of scrutiny does not happen transracially generally. And the last part about the sort of, again, this idea of like hairstyles or things that provoke, when we're talking about natural hair, we're talking about the way that people's hair grows out of their head, right? Like for most Black people, if their hair is untouched, it will eventually lock. That's what freeform locks are. So this idea of like your hair as it kind of grows out of your head is provocative, is attention seeking, needs to be changed in some way, is definitely racialized. So I think when we break down kind of what these notions of professionalism are really rooted in, again, it's a broader history of anti-Blackness, and I just wanted to, I'm always very, I think for people who are young people, it is very easy to sort of look at older generations and older people and say like, they think this about, like, they talk about my hair bad, or they try to like, they're just stuck in their old school sort of way of thinking about these things. But one, I'm just very big on ancestors and lineage, and I can only be because the people who came before me were who they are and did work so that I can sit in the seat and do what I do and have the hair that I have. But it's also for them, particularly depending on where they grew up, when they grew up. This stuff was a matter of safety. This stuff was a matter of survival. This stuff was a matter of like, I'm going to wear my hair to get the job because this is the one office in like this town that's hiring Black women for this job, right? Like it becomes, the stakes are so high, and the sort of levels of, you know, just violence and structural racism that our ancestors went through. You know, it's no wonder that, you know, when I locked my hair, so my aunties were just like, really? You know, it comes from a place. And so I think it's always important to hold that as well.
I love that you brought that up.
Me too.
Did I lose my mic here? Can you hear me? Oh, okay. Anyway, thank you for surfacing that.
I agree.